The chemistry lab buzzed with the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Beakers filled with blue liquids shimmered under the glow, rows of test tubes lined neatly like silent spectators. The smell of ethanol hung faintly in the air. It was just another school day, ordinary on the surface, but beneath that surface, tension coiled like a snake waiting to strike. Jason Miller leaned lazily against the back counter, spinning a pen between his fingers. He was handsome in the way athletes usually were: broad shoulders, confident smirk, but that smirk carried venom. Jason was not just the school's football star. He was the bully who owned every hallway he walked through. Teachers feared confrontation with him. Students learned to keep their heads down. Nobody stopped Jason Miller. At least, not until her. Miss Evelyn Carter had only been teaching at Westwood High for a month. To the students, she was a mystery. Her silver-streaked hair was always tied into a perfect bun, her suits crisp, her gaze sharp. She carried herself differently than the other teachers. While they shuffled papers nervously or stumbled over their words, Evelyn spoke with a steadiness that silenced a room without raising her voice. She didn't tolerate excuses, and she didn't flinch when Jason tried his usual tricks. Jason hated it. For weeks, he had thrown everything at her: mockery, interruptions, even breaking equipment on purpose. But no matter what he did, Evelyn stood calm. Her unshaken composure was a mirror Jason couldn't break, and the reflection of his own weakness drove him mad. On that particular afternoon, the class was running a simple experiment with chemical reactions. Students whispered to each other, measuring powders, filling beakers, while Jason toyed with a smaller boy named Daniel. Jason grabbed Daniel's notebook, smirking, and tossed it into the sink full of water. Pages soaked instantly, ink bleeding into blurred stains. Laughter rippled across the room, but quickly died when Evelyn's voice sliced through the air. Jason, sit down. The room went silent. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, it was command, calm, firm, and absolute. Her eyes locked on him, steady as stone. Jason froze for a moment, then his smirk returned, but it was thinner this time, colder. He stood, his chair scraping across the tile with a screech that made students flinch. He walked toward her slowly, his steps deliberate. The air tightened with every footfall. Evelyn didn't move. Jason stopped right in front of her, his voice dropped to a growl. You think you're tough, don't you? Her expression didn't change. I think you should sit down before you regret this. The words hit him like a slap. His jaw clenched. And then, in one reckless burst, Jason's hand shot forward and clamped around her throat. Gasps erupted. Two boys in the background froze, their eyes wide, horror etched into their faces. Daniel's mouth dropped open, fear gluing him to his seat. Nobody moved. Jason leaned close, his grip tightening. Nobody's coming to save you. For a second, the world seemed to stop. But Evelyn Carter wasn't afraid. She looked him dead in the eye, her voice low, unshaken. I don't need saving. And in that instant, everything changed. Her hand shot up, twisting his wrist with such precision that Jason's grip instantly broke. Before anyone could blink, she stepped sideways, hooking his arm and forcing it behind his back. Jason let out a sharp cry, his knees buckling as she pushed him down toward the floor. The sound of his gasp echoed through the lab. The bully was on his knees. The class stared in stunned silence. Evelyn held him effortlessly, her posture straight, her movements controlled. She wasn't lashing out. She wasn't panicked. She was in complete command, like she had done this 100 times before. Jason struggled, his face red. Let me go. Her voice was ice. If you ever put your hands on anyone again, Jason Miller, I promise you, this will feel merciful compared to what comes next. The fear in his eyes was new. It was real. For the first time, Jason realized he wasn't in control. Moments later, the principal and security rushed in, alerted by the commotion. Evelyn released him, and Jason collapsed to the floor, humiliated. His classmates would never forget the sight. The king of the school, the untouchable bully, reduced to nothing. Jason was escorted out, his protests drowned out by whispers spreading like wildfire. His reign had ended in one moment. But Evelyn Carter's story was only beginning. That night in her small apartment, Evelyn sat alone in silence. The The day's events played over in her mind. Her composure in the lab had been instinct, muscle memory from a life she had left behind. She opened a drawer, pulling out a small wooden box. Inside lay a folded American flag, a pair of worn dog tags, and a medal for valor. Evelyn Carter had not always been a teacher. She had once been Staff Sergeant Carter, decorated soldier, survivor of battles in foreign deserts, leader of troops who depended on her strength. She had fought in wars most people couldn't imagine, seen horrors most people couldn't bear. And yet, standing in that lab today, facing a 17-year-old boy, she had felt something she hadn't in years: fear. Not for herself, but for what her past might cost her in this new life. The next morning, she returned to class expecting doubt, suspicion, maybe even judgment. Instead, something else waited for her. Daniel, the boy Jason had tormented, stood at her desk after class. His voice was quiet, trembling, but full of sincerity. "Miss Carter, thank you. Nobody ever stopped him before. You didn't just help me, you helped all of us." Evelyn's chest tightened. She had thought her past was a curse, that the soldier in her didn't belong in classrooms, but Daniel's words told her something different. Maybe her strength wasn't a shadow, maybe it was a light these kids needed. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effect spread. Students began to stand taller, speak louder. The quiet ones started raising their hands. The timid no longer walked with eyes on the floor. They had seen their teacher face the monster they all feared, and she had won. Jason's world, meanwhile, crumbled. His football scholarship was revoked, disciplinary hearings stacked up, and whispers of his attack on a teacher followed him everywhere. For the first time in his life, he was forced to face the consequences of his choices. His arrogance had destroyed his future. Evelyn Carter, however, had built something lasting. Her classroom became a sanctuary, not just a place for experiments and equations, but a place where courage lived. She wasn't just teaching science anymore. She was teaching strength, resilience, the power of standing up even when fear pressed down like a storm. Years later, after Daniel graduated, he sent her a letter. It read, "You showed me that courage isn't about being the strongest. It's about standing up when no one else will. You changed my life." Evelyn Carter folded the letter with trembling hands, tears in her eyes. In that moment, she knew the truth. Her past hadn't destroyed her future, it had prepared her for it. Because sometimes, the greatest battles aren't fought with guns or medals. They're fought in classrooms, with steady eyes and unshakable resolve. And sometimes, the strongest warriors aren't soldiers anymore, they're teachers.